Hello everyone, this is G and I'm back with another video. A bit of an impromptu video. I don't often make videos literally right when I come home from work, usually because I'm too tired and hungry. But I'm actually making this video. I'm hoping it won't be too long. Then again, a short video for me is like 20 minutes, so we'll see what happens. But I guess I'm making this video because I wanted to sort of address the whole Miles Morales Thor thing from my perspective, especially since my name seems to be getting around a bit, in a positive way. I'm not upset, but I know that Wes of Thinking Critical made a video and he mentioned me. Thank you, Wes. I was notified that Yellow Flash did a video and he featured this article that I'm showing here, which features my tweet. So thank you to Yellow Flash as well, and thank you for this article, I guess, from Inside the Magic. So thank you. Is that Clownfish affiliated? It might be. I don't remember off the top of my head, but whoever wrote this, thank you as well. Um, Also, thank you to the, what is it, just under 1,000 or just around 1,000 people who are following me on Twitter. Um, Thank you so much for that. And the, what is that, like 675 or something here on YouTube who follow me. Uh, Despite my attempts to not grow, I guess you could say, I am not a. I have a sick family member, so that's the sickness. That's the yakking and the coughing. But despite my attempts to actually keep things very lo-fi and to not grow because I'm not a professional YouTuber and I have no desire to be, you guys keep finding me and you keep subscribing and I'm growing, I guess, in sort of in spite of myself. And it's all thanks to you guys. So whatever platform you're on and that you follow me on, sincerely, thank you for that. I'm usually just, spouting opinions into the wind. So when something, sort of like this happens, I'm like, oh, wow, people really were listening. But as critique, there's not really much more I could say from a sort of a artistic critique standpoint, right? When it comes to the whole Miles Morales Thor thing, I've expressed every major opinion that I have about that on Twitter, and I even made a post on my YouTube account a few days ago, which linked back to the Twitter. Right, this is one of my many tweets that's featured here in this article about me being angry about the Hood Thor. So, what I thought I would do, since I have no more, I guess you could say, artistic opinions to share, is that I would try to explain why, from my own perspective, this is so offensive to me, right? Because it's one thing for me to say it makes me angry, it's another thing to explain why it makes me angry. And the best way I can describe it is that when I saw those images, and I saw more and more as people kept tweeting and talking about it, and I was retweeting and everything, I saw more of these images. And first of all, as we all know, and I think if we've all more or less come to agreement that this particular take on Thor, of Miles Morales being Thor, right, is just playing to every offensive um, hood stereotype, right? I mean, the constant rhyming. I mean, every line is nearly in a rhyme scheme, right? He's just rapping all the time. Not even real world rappers literally rap all the time, and it's lifting lines from rap tracks. Like there's one page where Miles is fighting, and the panel says "flip it in reverse," and I'm like, that's work it. That's literally Missy Elliott. Leave her out of this. And apparently, there's another one. I think it's when he goes something about straight up in your face to diss you, something to that effect. As someone said, it was from KRS-One. I thought there was a similar line in an old Public Enemy track, but then again, I don't really follow rap all that closely. I'm more of a classic rock girl, so I really couldn't tell you. But I knew the "Work It" line because I remembered that song being very popular. But What makes me so angry about this is that, from my perspective, and again, that's the only perspective I'm sharing, I don't claim to speak for anybody but myself. This comic is more than just playing to negative stereotypes about African Americans in New York City. To be fair, Marvel's always done that. I mean, I've read a lot of their work from the 70s and 80s, and for the longest time, they had this stereotype of like every black person coming out of Harlem and every black person coming out of poverty. So that's nothing new. It's annoying. It's annoying as hell, but it's nothing new. But what sincerely makes me angry is that, from my perspective, Yehudi Mercado and his creative team, right, in particular the artist, they didn't just play into dated stereotypes, right? Dated 80s, 90s references and stereotypes about black people living in the hood or black people who like rap or anything like that. What sort of set me off was that image, I think we've all seen it, of Miles literally with his arms out, just like this, talking about the life tree in Brooklyn and all this other stuff. And it's like, my home. It's like, no, this is supposed to be Asgard, right? This is a story where it's not just Miles who just happens to be literally a empowered black young man, right? Literally a thunder god, right? All of the gods have been reimagined. Sif is now a black woman, referring to Hot Wings or whatever the hell it is. Odin is now a black man, a bald black dude, wearing Timbs and apparently not giving a damn about his son. Thanks for playing in the stereotypes, Yehudi. Right? And it's Loki of all people who is like the sane man, the one making sense. And he's black too. So everybody has been flipped and lifted and is not behaving like themselves. Right? But in the end, it's this image of a black man who literally has the powers of a god. And he's literally embracing everything I have spent a lifetime to not be defined by, right? You have Marvel literally allowed this to go to print and to be released, both in print and digitally, right? This had to go past editors, it had to be revised. A lot of work went into this. And nobody thought for a second, hey, this might be offensive to some people, especially since there is no message to this. There's no message. At least with the Marvel stuff like Power Man or other comics they did back in the day, there was some message there about what it's like growing up in a rough neighborhood, poverty ridden, and sort of how that forms you, makes you, and the struggle to get out of that, if you get out at all. But there's absolutely no message here. You have a black male god, regardless of whether he's empowered by Thor or anyone else. A black male god literally embracing urban decay. Things like sneakers on a power line. It's not cute. It's not quirky. It's not an aesthetic. It's a sign of crime. It's a sign of gang violence. At least in some instances. Because them shoes, their owners are probably 6 feet under, taking a permanent dirt nap. And that's what angers me so much about it. It's a mockery of the very real circumstances I have had to grow up around and live around for all my life. I have spent a lifetime not trying very hard not to be a stereotype, trying very hard to not fall into the pitfalls that ruin so many people, that have ruined the lives of many people in my own family, and people that extended family or friends or all that. One of my uncles, Uncle Stanley, rest in peace, was murdered over a $5 card game. Never got to see his daughter grow up. Never got to see his little baby girl. Never got to be a father to her. Because he was caught up in that life. And even when he tried to change and get clean and get straight because he had a daughter on the way. And he was in love at the time and life was finally going good. He gets murdered over a $5 card game. right? That's what this life is. That's what growing up in the ghetto and being in the ghetto does for a lot of people. I am fortunate in that for all of the disagreements and animosities my mother and I have, and there are many, she made sure that me and my brother would not get caught up in that life. And we didn't, thankfully. But still, even if you're not caught up in it, even if you're not necessarily living it, right? You're not doing the drugs or doing the gang banging. You grow up around it. You see it, whether or not you want to admit it or acknowledge it. It influences you. People talk about media influences. You want to know what the most corruptive and the most beneficial influence on a kid is? Life itself. That will do more to mold a child than any comic book, TV show, or anything else will. But regardless of that, there's absolutely no reason to have a literal empowered black man embrace the circumstances that have put so many of his black brothers in the ground, that have put so many of his black sisters out on the street or on welfare. Graffiti on buildings, right? And I'm not talking about stuff like Five Points, which used to be in Queens and was sadly torn down for some tasteless, drab condominiums. I'm not talking about stuff like that. I'm not talking about things like murals. I'm not talking about the artistic expression of graffiti. I'm talking about the stuff that I see outside all the time, right? Graffiti tags on buildings or graffiti tags on the steel gates, right? That people pull down on their buildings when they close up shop for the night. I mean, stuff like that. That's not happy. That's not positive. Again, it's a sign of crime. It's a sign of gangs. I don't know how many times in my life, and I'm 37, that I have left my apartment building early to go to school or to go to work or whatever I plan to do for the day. And I walk and I look down, and not only am I literally dodging animal feces or human feces on the ground, that's bad enough. But you look sometimes and you will see a small memorial with a lot of candles and a picture, right? And it will feature the face of a kid, right? Of a teenager. Most of the time, RJ, most of the time, these these uh, these memorials pop up right in the middle of the street. Will usually be against a gate, right, of some sort. Pop up because the kid, more often than not, was killed in an incident of gang violence. You will see signs on a door talking about someone's death. Sometimes it's an older person, it's just their time has come, right? But for a lot of them, especially if they're like 18 or they're in the early or mid 20s, it's more likely than not that it's gang violence, and that's why they're gone. I have literally seen uh, police choppers fly above the place where I live looking for criminals. We have literally at times been told to stay in the house or stay in the apartment because there's an active search for a criminal going on. Right? When I was a little kid, and it was really dangerous. I just remember I was a kid in the '90s, so you had the crack epidemic, right? And every time you heard a bang, right, it didn't matter if it was fireworks, it didn't matter if it was a car backfiring. You were told that that could be a gunshot, and you duck. Even to this day, you see that window behind me. I'm like, oh, bullet's not gonna come through or over here. You can't see it, but I'm literally sitting across from a window where my AC is, and I'm like, I hope it don't get nothing happens, right? Even today, like once I'm done with this video, I'm gonna pull the shades down on the windows and close the windows. It could be a hot night tonight, and I'll still have to close the windows because you literally start, especially this time, because people are out late at night because it's hot. You don't just hear people laughing or joking, just being loud. No, no, no. You hear people screaming, fighting, threatening to kill each other. At times attempting to kill each other. And not only does it ruin your sleep, I'm like, I don't want like the cops, coming to my door asking like, Miss Gentry, did you hear anything? I don't want to know. I just shut down. Like, once it comes down, I know nothing. I see nothing. I remember, what was it? December 2020. I literally had to call the cops 3 times, all because I made the mistake of looking outside the window in the middle of the day. 2 instances were for fighting. I saw fights break out. One involved a kid, a teenager, who's getting jumped. I know what that's like, so I was like, yeah, okay, let me call the police. But another one was an older man passing out in the middle of the street and nobody would help him. No one. I don't know what happened to that man, but I was like, I can't, see this and like let him die in the street without at least trying to do something. Right? But this is what life in the ghetto, at least in my experience, is like. New York City is one of those very odd places where it's both as bad or worse than you've heard, and at the same time not as bad. It all depends on which story you are hearing. Right? It's a very weird thing. And when I see images like Miles holding his hands up, and it's like, my Asgard is my hood. It's like, or talking about, oh, the life tree grows in Brooklyn. I'm like, where in Brooklyn? Kingsbridge? That's not a nice neighborhood. Bed-Stuy? Not a nice neighborhood. At least last time I checked. So tell me, since the life tree grows in Brooklyn, what life? A life of poverty? A life of violence? A life of despair? A life of broken hearts, broken dreams, pregnant mothers on welfare? Life of mothers crying for their dead sons who got into the gang life and didn't get out? A life of not having a father to raise you and to raise you right? That life? The circumstances that have torn down so many homes and so many people and have been a huge thorn in the side of the African American community, in particular the urban African American community, which he's supposed to represent. Miles Thor is supposed to be representative of this. He literally embraces it, literally welcomes it. That, because if that's a life tree, we need a new life tree. This is not a positive thing. And that is what frustrates me about it all. I have spent my whole life, in particular my teens and going into my early adulthood, both ashamed of my circumstances and trying so hard to defy them and to not have them pull me down into the same pitfalls that I saw other people fall into. I have tried very hard to learn from the cautionary tales and from the tragedy that I grew up around. Right? Now, of course, these days I don't feel any shame. I'm not necessarily proud, but I don't necessarily feel any shame either. But for a long time, yeah, I did feel shame. Deep shame for being from the ghetto, from being from the projects. To the point that I would never let anyone come over because the apartment was literally falling apart. And the friggin' NYCHA would never come and actually fix any damn thing. And they still don't. 30 years later, and they still don't. But long story short, because I think I'm just rambling now. I have spent my whole life in this situation in one way or another. I've never lived in the nice parts of New York City. I don't come from the nice parts of New York City. I come from the rough side of town. I am that kid from the rough side of the tracks. I grew up in rough neighborhoods in Queens. And I've been across New York in good neighborhoods and bad for the past, 20 years or so. And I can tell you that, having literally lived this, as I said in the tweet, it's not fun. Graffiti is not street art. It's dark, it's dangerous, It can literally ruin your life or take your life if you are not careful. Even if you are careful, sometimes you still fall victim to it. And when I see a writer who does not come from those circumstances, I don't care that Yehudi Mercado or the other artists on the book are not black. I don't buy into that idea that, oh, a black person should have wrote this because a black person would understand. No. Like with like, it's not necessarily an answer. Marvel tried this with Cena Grace, right? So sexuality. Cena Grace is an openly gay man, and he wrote uh, gay Bobby Drake, gay Iceman. He got two chances to write that, and he mucked it up both times because, like with Mercado here, he played to every gay stereotype instead of writing the character of Bobby Drake, who just happens to now be realizing later on in life he's a homosexual. That's not what Cena Grace wrote. Cena Grace wrote Jack McFarlane with ice powers. It was never Bobby Drake of any orientation. And I'm of the same opinion here that if you've got a black person who works in the mainstream industry or who works in Marvel to write this, even if RJ, can you make up your mind? Even if they come from the same circumstances I do, or even if they are black and grew up in a hood someplace else, it doesn't automatically mean that they would write a good story. Especially if this is a case of sort of like a design by committee thing. Though having seen some of Yehudi's other work, I do think this is more him, right? His sort of style of writing when it comes to black characters than necessarily Marvel's direction. Although, to be fair, Marvel is very much responsible because this happens under their banner, with their character names. They release it, they approve it. Right, so believe me, I blame them too. But I don't think that this was a design by committee thing, right? Or at least it doesn't seem that way. But it's still a terrible, terrible, terrible look. It's awful to have a black character, right? A black character, they've been trying to make a premier black lead for a while now, right? Although they keep giving him white hero names, Spider-Man in particular, but also with this whole what if thing, you have Captain America, Wolverine, Hulk, and now Thor, so all classically white heroes. He doesn't get to be the mantle bearer for Blade or Bishop or Power Man or Black Panther or anything like that, right? But my gripes about that aside, it is, in my opinion, just insulting to have a young black man who you're trying to make into a premier character and make into your black lead, or one of your black leads, especially for a younger generation, right? Miles is meant to appeal to a younger audience than necessarily someone like me, who's probably going to lean toward the more classic heroes that I grew up with, right? Miles is meant to appeal to the person growing up and reading comics in their youth now. And you literally have him with the powers of a god, and you have him embracing urban decay and the very circumstances that cause that decay and that cause many people like him to die. There's a reason why many black people, black celebrities who get out of the hood don't go back in any significant way. They may do a photo shoot or a photo op or record a video or have some sort of community event, but they don't live there, right? Nas didn't come back to Queensbridge, right? Neither did Mobb Deep. They left. And they left for good reason. Okay, they don't come back. They move out to a house in the hills where it's safe. I don't have that luxury, at least not yet. Who knows what the future brings, but as of this time, I don't get to live in a gated community, at least not in the traditional sense. Right? All these actors and rappers, right, they may maintain the look or the aesthetic, but they sure as hell aren't keeping ties with the gangs, not if they want to live at least. And most of them do. So most of them You know, they don't hold on to those ties. They cut those ties sooner or later. They don't set up shop here, as it were, and try to build up or change the communities. They try to do that from afar, and I don't blame them. I don't blame them. If I had the money they have, I'd leave too. But again, long story short, this was an insult. This is an insult. It doesn't matter who wrote it, it doesn't matter where they come from. This should have been approached with nuance and care, and it should not have turned Miles into a walking, talking ghetto blaster 90s stereotype that you would have seen on SNL, not SNL, in Living Color back in the day. What's probably the most offensive about all this is that Brian Michael Bendis, who I don't think is a good writer, one of the things he tried to establish when he created Miles or helped write Miles' early stories way back when was that Miles wanted to be more than Black Spider-Man. So what does Marvel do in this issue? They turn him into stereotypical Black Thor, who has no personality of his own. He doesn't have the personality of Thor. He doesn't have the personality of Miles Morales. He's not a character. He's a caricature. And it's insulting. So anyway, that's my perspective on this. A bit more personal than I usually get. But I just wanted to share that and to sort of explain my anger at this. And again, thank you to everyone. Thank you to Flash. Thank you to Yellow Flash, I should say. Thank you to Wes and to AL who notified me, and to everyone. Everyone. Whether we agree or disagree, thank you so much for taking the time out to listen to me or to read the snarky things I say on the internet. Anyway, I have stuff to do, food to eat, a cat to feed, and I will see you guys around. Have a good day or night wherever you are. Bye.